Have you ever seen a woman fall to her lowest point, only to rise again not for revenge, but to begin anew with love itself? This is the story of Natasha Monroe, a woman who once had everything, and then lost it all in a single live television interview. But she never imagined that from that darkest moment, life would open another path, one where a man would stand beside her through the storm, and a child named Hope would become the miracle that healed them all. A journey born from betrayal, tempered by forgiveness, and ending in the light of those who chose to stay. If you've ever believed that every storm carries a reason, this story is for you. The studio lights blazed brightly, as if celebrating a triumph. Beneath them, applause, laughter, and murmurs of excitement blended, creating that unique pulse of live television. All eyes were fixed on the woman seated at center stage, Natasha Monroe. In her jade silk dress, Natasha glowed effortlessly. Her soft brown curls framed a calm, confident face, the look of a woman who had touched the pinnacle of the contemporary art world. 6 months pregnant, she still carried herself with poise and grace, an image every magazine in Los Angeles would kill to feature. Natasha Monroe, welcome to Morning Spectrum. Patricia Webb, the veteran host, greeted her with a brilliant smile. Applause erupted again. "Thank you, Patricia. It's a pleasure to be here," Natasha replied, her voice gentle yet steady. Everything was perfect. The camera sweeping smoothly, the audience warm, the lights casting a soft glow over her skin. Behind her, the backdrop read Voices of the Forgotten, the exhibition that moved America. The interview was meant to honor her for an exhibition that had just shattered records at Riverside Gallery. "Your exhibition is extraordinary," Patricia began, her tone both professional and heartfelt. "Critics are calling it the most important cultural event of the year. How does it feel?" Natasha smiled, resting a hand lightly on her belly. "It feels like being heard, being seen, after so many years of being just another name in the vast art world. Voices of the Forgotten isn't just art, it's the voice of those who were once invisible, and today, I feel like they're finally being heard." The audience applauded. Natasha glanced toward the front row, where a few journalists took notes. She had no idea the world would see her differently in just minutes, raw, broken, and more exposed than any artwork she'd ever created. "And I hear," Patricia continued, a playful glint in her eye, "we have another reason to celebrate. You're expecting your first child." Natasha laughed softly, brushing her hand over her bump. "Yes, a baby girl. We'll meet her in 3 months." "How wonderful," Patricia exclaimed, and the audience clapped again. "Let's make this moment even more special. How about we now call your husband Devon to share this joy with him?" Natasha froze. Her smile wavered. "Oh, I didn't know that." But Patricia had already turned to signal the producer off stage. "Let's bring Devon Monroe, Natasha's husband, on the video line." The crowd cheered. Natasha felt her heartbeat quicken. She had never liked surprises, especially those she hadn't agreed to. The camera panned, and the big screen behind her flickered to life. For a second, the studio went silent. The face on the screen was not Devon's. It was a young woman, almost naked, hair tousled, voice groggy. "Hello?" she murmured, squinting into the camera, confusion spreading across her face. Natasha froze. She recognized her instantly. Simone, her old college friend. The one she had introduced to Devon 8 months ago at a small party. "Simone?" Natasha's voice was barely a whisper. The girl on screen startled, realizing what was happening. "Oh my God." "Natasha." Behind her, a figure moved. Devon stepped into frame, shirtless, his face shocked for only a moment. Then, before millions watching live, his expression hardened. He didn't turn off the camera. "Natasha," he said evenly, his tone flat. "I was going to tell you soon." Patricia gasped, signaling the crew to cut the feed, but the technicians froze. Devon continued, calm as if giving a press statement. "I'm tired of pretending to be the perfect husband. I don't want to fake it anymore. This," he gestured around the hotel room where Simone stood, "this is my real life." The studio was dead silent. The cameras still rolled. Natasha could only hear the pounding of her heart. "Devon, you're..." On live television, Patricia stammered. "Good," he said, At least people will finally know the truth. Natasha, I never wanted that baby. You said you were on birth control. You trapped me. I won't play father to a child I never wanted. Someone in the audience gasped a small, horrified, "Oh my God." Natasha sat frozen, her hands still on her belly, her face drained of color. Everything blurred: lights, sounds, the entire world. She caught fragments of his words. "You're obsessed with perfection. I don't love you anymore. I've been with Simone for 8 months." When the broadcast was finally cut, chaos erupted in the studio. Patricia turned to say something, but Natasha was already standing. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She only said quietly, "I need to leave." And she did, strolling, silently, each step slicing through invisible glass. Behind her, the audience sat stunned, half in shock, half in sympathy. And in the final seconds before the feed ended, the camera captured Natasha's face, eerily calm, eyes piercing through the screen. In Seattle, over 1,000 miles away, Dante Rossi paused mid-meeting in the glass tower of Rossi Global. A young associate rushed in and turned on the TV. "Sir, you need to see this." Natasha's image filled the screen. Not a woman broken, but a woman who refused to collapse, who didn't shed a tear despite public betrayal. Dante watched in silence. When she walked off stage, he spoke softly. "Grace, that's what real grace looks like." Then he told his assistant, Maya, "Find everything you can about Natasha Monroe and Riverside Gallery. I want to speak to her, but not today. Give her time to rise." The Seattle rain fell quietly outside the glass walls, blending with the city lights. A new story had just been set in motion. That night, Natasha sat in her car in the studio's underground lot. The world had drained of color. Her phone buzzed non-stop texts from her mother, friends, reporters. They all asked, "Are you okay?" But she no longer knew what okay meant. She only knew she had to breathe. 1, 2, 3. "Just go home," she whispered to herself. Her apartment sat on the 12th floor of a quiet West Hollywood building favored by reclusive artists. She stepped inside and turned on the lights. Everything was untouched: her easel, her frames, the wedding photo on the wall now, a knife to the heart. She walked straight to the bathroom and turned on the hot water. Steam clouded the mirror, blurring the face of the woman she barely recognized. Her eyes were red, but dry. She slipped off the jade dress, letting it fall to the floor like an old skin. The water streamed down her shoulders, mingling with the first tears since she'd left the stage. But they weren't tears of weakness. They were released, the shedding of perfection, leaving only what was real. "We'll be okay," she murmured, touching her belly. "Just you and me now, but we'll be okay." Outside, Los Angeles glittered, indifferent to her collapse. Inside the small apartment, the woman once praised by the whole city was quietly rebuilding her world piece by trembling piece. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds. Natasha sat at her desk, dressed in black, hair neatly tied, laptop open. No tears, only lists, numbers, and calls to make. When her gallery assistant phoned, her voice was so composed it silenced the room. "I'll be there on time as usual. No one talks to the press. Understood? Today is a normal work day." While headlines screamed "Artist betrayed by husband" on live TV, Natasha Monroe's on-air tragedy, she walked out of her building past flashing cameras. "How do you feel?" someone shouted. She smiled faintly. "I feel freer than ever." Across the country, in Seattle, Dante Rossi sat in his office. He rewatched the footage not out of curiosity this time, but out of empathy. He paused at the final frame, Natasha lifting her head, even under the harsh light. Something in her eyes said, "She won't break. She'll rise again," Dante murmured. "And when she's ready, I'll be there." His assistant looked up. "Are you thinking of a collaboration, sir?" Dante shook his head. "No. I'm thinking of giving her a chance. Some people can change the world if placed at the right moment." Outside, the Seattle rain kept falling cold, patient, unrelenting, like the gaze of the man looking south, toward Los Angeles, where scandal burned bright. And there, amid the ashes, a woman began to rewrite her fate. If there's ever a moment when a person truly realizes they're alive, it's when there's nothing left to lose. That night, Natasha Monroe learned exactly that. Los Angeles had quieted into the late hours, leaving only the glow of neon lights reflecting off high-rise windows. She sat on the floor in her 12th-floor apartment, back against the wall, eyes open, staring into the dark. The silence was so deep she could hear her own heartbeat. Across the room, the jade silk dress still lay crumpled on the floor, catching faint gold from the lamp, a relic of a glorious night turned nightmare. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. A message from her mother. "Sweetheart, I'm flying out tomorrow morning. Don't stay alone." From a reporter. "Natasha, we just need one quote from you." And from Devon. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen like this." Natasha turned the phone off. She didn't want to hear another voice. Didn't want to explain. Didn't want to justify. She just needed silence to find out what was left of herself after the storm had passed. Her belly, round and full, reminded her that even when the world collapses, there is still life growing within. She placed a hand over it, feeling a faint kick, a quiet pulse of persistence amid the ruins of trust and pride. "We're okay," she whispered. "You and me, we're okay." It was the first thing she had said in hours. A small promise, but enough to steady her breath. She stood, walked to the bathroom, and turned on the hot water. Steam rose, blurring the mirror, softening the cracks in her reflection. Water ran over her shoulders, down her skin, mixing with tears. She didn't scream. She didn't break things. She let the water wash away everything that no longer belonged to her. Devon, Simone, the fame, the facade of happiness, all of it, down the drain. Afterward, Natasha wrapped herself in a white robe and sat at her desk. The table was still covered with exhibition files and unfinished sketches. She switched on the lamp, its warm light spilling over photos of the unknown artists she had once helped. She thought of those forgotten souls who kept painting, singing, and living because they believed art could still save them. "Maybe now," she said softly, her voice trembling. "It's my turn to learn that." She opened her laptop and began to type into her digital journal. Day 1 after the interview. No more Devon. No more perfect image. Just me and this child. If this is the end, I'll make it my beginning. When she finished typing, Natasha smiled. Not the smile of someone who had lost everything, but of someone who had finally realized she still had herself. Outside, dawn crept slowly over Los Angeles, brushing the silver rooftops. The first light slipped through the curtains and touched her belly, as if to remind her, every new beginning starts in the dark. The next morning, Natasha rose early, tied her hair, slipped into a simple black dress, and applied light makeup. No trace of the humiliation from the night before remained on her face. She unlocked her phone. Over 200 messages, 80 missed calls, 40 emails. She replied to only one, her gallery assistant. "I'll be there on time, no press statements, no delays, work as usual." Outside her building, reporters waited. As she stepped out, camera flashes burst like fireworks. "Natasha, do you have anything to say to your husband? Do you think he betrayed you because of fame? Will you forgive him?" Natasha paused for half a second, looked straight into the lens, and said slowly, clear enough for every microphone to catch, "There's nothing to forgive. I hope he finds what he's really looking for." Then she walked on, tall, steady, head held high through the sea of lights and voices. That morning, Los Angeles seemed to fall silent for a brief, breathless moment, as if the entire city bowed to the quiet power of a woman who refused to fall. That same afternoon, more than 1,000 miles away in rain-draped Seattle, Dante Rossi sat in his high-rise office. Rain traced lines down the glass, blurring the city into an abstract painting. On his desk, the screen was paused at the frame of Natasha leaving the studio, her back straight, her face calm, the stage lights catching her like a quiet flame. He watched it again for the 4th time. Not out of pity, but curiosity. How could someone remain so composed when their entire world had just collapsed? Dante had seen hundreds fall in business, failures, betrayals, bankruptcies, but he had never seen eyes like hers. They weren't the eyes of defeat. They were the eyes of someone quietly preparing to rise. "Maya," he called, his voice low. His assistant, Maya Lopez, appeared with a tablet in hand. "I did the research you requested. Natasha Monroe, 32. lead curator at Riverside Gallery, named one of the art review's top 10 most influential women in art last year. Born in Oregon. Self-made since 18. Never depended on anyone. Dante nodded. And now she's lost everything except her child. Seems that way, Maya replied, her tone softening. But public opinion is on her side. People are calling her the woman who stayed graceful. A faint smile touched Dante's lips. Graceful. That's exactly the word. He walked to the window. Below, Seattle shimmered through the rain, lights rippling across the wet streets like reflections of memory. She's not someone who needs pity, he said. Just a chance to begin again. You're thinking of offering her a position? Maya asked. Not just a position. Dante turned, eyes steady. Rossi Global is about to launch its cultural development initiative. We need someone who understands that art reaches people, not just profit. Natasha Monroe is that person. Maya hesitated. But, with the media storm around her right now, Dante replied, it's in the storm that you see who can keep their balance. He paused, then added, not yet, though. She needs time to breathe. Send flowers to her gallery from Rossi Foundation. No signature. Just a gesture to let her know someone believes in her. Maya smiled. Understood, sir. That evening, when Natasha returned home, she found a bouquet waiting by her door. No card, no name, only a small note. The strong don't need rescuing. They need their wings returned. She stood there for a long time, reading the line repeatedly. She didn't know who had sent it, but something inside her stirred a quiet warmth, like the first sunlight after a storm. Natasha placed the bouquet in a vase, then stepped onto her balcony. Below, the city still glittered. The traffic moved. Life went on as if no one had just fallen apart. But here, on the 12th floor, a woman was reborn, one breath, one heartbeat, one thought at a time. That night, Natasha opened her laptop and pulled up old sketches. She drew her own face, not flawless, not smooth, just eyes full of pain and resilience. When she finished, she signed the bottom corner, NM 2025. Her first piece since that fateful interview. Outside, the Los Angeles night breeze carried the scent of salt and smoke, and within its whisper was a voice, soft but certain. Rise. You still have a whole life left to love and to be loved. Some meetings aren't scheduled on a calendar, they're written by fate. For Natasha, that meeting began with a short email containing only one line. I want to invite you to Seattle. Dinner at Edgewater Hotel. Friday, 7 p.m. Dr. No title, no promise, no introduction. But Natasha knew the name immediately. Dante Rossi, the man the business world called the master of order in chaos, CEO of Rossi Global, a tech empire in everything but name. She read the email 3 times. There was no apparent reason to refuse, but no particular reason to accept. Still, somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, if someone sees you not out of pity, but respect, listen. 3 days later, her flight from Los Angeles touched down in Seattle beneath its signature, drizzle fine, cold, and persistent. The air here felt softer, gentler than Hollywood's glare. Natasha entered the lobby of the Edgewater Hotel, where warm light spilled down from oak beams above. The scent of coffee mingled with the rhythm of waves from Elliott Bay, giving her a strange sense of calm, half foreign, half familiar. The gentleman is expecting you, the receptionist smiled. Private dining, 2nd floor. The door opened to a softly lit room, a long table draped in white linen. At the far end sat Dante Rossi, wearing a charcoal shirt and a glass of water. He didn't need an introduction. His calm gaze and unforced posture radiated an authority that seemed to bend the room toward him. Miss Monroe. He stood, his voice low and precise. Thank you for coming, Mr. Rossi. Natasha nodded. Why would a tech CEO want to meet an art curator who just lived through a scandal on live television? A faint smile flickered in his eyes. I appreciate your directness. But first, no scandal can erase real talent. He gestured for the waiter to pour wine. They sat, the silence between them steady and deliberate, 2 people testing the boundaries of trust. I watched that interview, Dante said. And I didn't just see an artist. I saw a woman who kept her dignity while losing everything. That strength, Natasha, that's what I want for my new project. Project? She asked, brows slightly raised, skepticism lacing her tone. Rossi Global is launching a community cultural restoration initiative in 12 cities, where art becomes a tool for healing. I want you to lead it. He slid a folder across the table. Title: Director of Cultural Development. Full creative control. Unlimited budget. Natasha opened the first page. The numbers made her pause 3 times her current salary, stock options, and clauses protecting her health and baby. This is a lot, she said softly. Why me? Because you understand loss, Dante answered without hesitation. Only those who've known loss can help others find themselves again. The words held her still. Outside, the rain thickened, tapping lightly against the window. She turned toward the misty city, then back at him. If I say yes, what do you expect from me? Just one thing, he said. Honesty. I don't want a campaign. I want a movement. I want spaces where people feel seen and heard, and I believe you can create them. She studied him, searching for something beneath the offer pity, PR strategy, corporate morality. But his eyes were calm, unjudging. What she felt instead was sincerity. You believe in me, she said quietly, even when the world doesn't. Not believe, he corrected gently. Recognize. A faint curve touched his lips. The truly strong don't need to prove anything. They need a chance. Silence settled between them. Natasha lifted her glass. If I accept, can I start over from the same place that broke me? You can start over anywhere, Dante said. Even from your own heart. She didn't answer right away. She stared into the wine, deep red, rippling under the light, like blood, like rebirth. Then she smiled, softly. Then, I accept. Dante didn't look surprised. He nodded. I knew you would. He rose, extending his hand. She placed hers in his steady, warm handshake that felt like the beginning of something more than work. As she left the dining room, Natasha looked out toward the bay. Rain still fell, Seattle's lights glimmering across the water. She saw her reflection there blurred, imperfect, but still present. For the first time in months, she felt something strange and new. Hope. The next morning, Natasha arrived at Rossi Global headquarters, a 50-story glass tower overlooking Lake Union. The place radiated quiet precision, apart from Los Angeles's loud glitter. Maya Lopez, Dante's assistant, greeted her in the lobby. The young woman's dark hair was tied back, her smile warm, her eyes understanding. Welcome to Rossi, Maya said. He's waiting for you on the 42nd floor. When the elevator opened, Dante's office was spacious yet understated. Natural light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling glass. On his desk were architectural models, photos from art installations, and one small framed image, Natasha, smiling at the voices of the forgotten exhibition, before everything changed. You keep my picture? She asked, half surprised, half guarded. Dante smiled. I keep images that remind me of resilience. They remind me there are things money can't buy. His answer softened her. They began discussing the project community art centers, rotating exhibits, and scholarships for young artists. Dante knew every detail, yet never imposed. He listened, asked, and took notes, letting her speak freely. Natasha felt her voice mattered for the first time in a long time. When the meeting ended, Dante said, You can use this office if you'd like. I want you to work comfortably. No need, Natasha replied. All I need is a small space and your trust. He looked at her with quiet admiration. Trust, you already have. The room, I'll still prepare. They stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the city. Below, Seattle shimmered in the rain, light scattering like wet glass shards. You know, Dante said, it rains here almost yearly. They say you either learn to love it or you leave. And you chose to love it, Natasha asked. He smiled. No, I chose to understand it. Rain slows things down. It forces you to look inward. His words silenced her for a moment. She touched the cold railing, watching raindrops bead along the metal, clear, real, alive. Just like her life now, not glamorous, but finally honest. Dante, she said quietly. "I used to think falling apart was the worst thing that could happen, but now, maybe it was just the universe forcing me to change direction." He turned to her, his gaze deep, steady, and warm. "The universe only does that to people it still expects great things from." At that moment, Natasha understood that something else had begun to grow between two people who had both stopped believing in love. Not loud, not dramatic, just quietly, deeply human. Back at her hotel that evening, she opened the window to watch the rain. She rested a hand on her belly and smiled. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "I think I just found our new beginning." Under Seattle's city lights, her smile was soft as the rain, clear, fragile, and profoundly beautiful. December in Seattle was cold and wet. The sky stayed grey all day. The trees stood bare, and every cafe window was fogged with steam. The whole city seemed washed in silver grey, a colour Natasha often told her colleagues, "Looks like a painting that's waiting for its light." She had been in Seattle for 3 months now, 7 months pregnant. Each morning, she visited Rossi Global for a few hours to meet with teams on the Community Art Initiative. In the afternoons, she returned home, sitting on her 10th-floor balcony, watching the rain fall over the lake. Her life had become strangely peaceful, no reporters, no social media noise, only the steady rhythm of the child growing inside her. One night, as she was finishing the layout for the first cultural center, her phone buzzed. The screen read, "Dante Rossi." "Hello," she answered. "Sorry to call so late." His voice was deep and calm. "I just reviewed your design proposal. The section for emerging artists is brilliant. How you used light makes me think you don't just work with art. You understand it." Natasha smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I lived because of it. When everything else collapsed, art was the only thing left." There was a brief silence on the other end. Then Dante asked softly, "Are you feeling well, Natasha?" "That's an odd question," she teased. "I mean it. I know the last months haven't been easy." There was something in his tone, not pity, but genuine concern. A quiet kind of care, careful but warm enough to reach her. "I'm fine," she said. "She's fine too. Every time I hear her heartbeat, everything else feels small." "She?" "Yes. I've chosen her name." "What is it?" She smiled, looking out at the rain. "Hope." Dante repeated it softly, tasting the word, hope, because she's the one reason I still believe there's space for good things in this world. He didn't say anything after that, just a quiet breath. But Natasha knew he understood. 2 months later, on a freezing Sunday night, Natasha was reviewing her presentation for the city council when her stomach tightened sharply. She thought it was just another Braxton Hicks contraction until her water broke. Fear hit like a wave. She took a deep breath, recalling her doctor's voice. "Don't panic. Call 911. Call your birthing support." Her hands trembled as she dialed. When the dispatcher asked if she had anyone with her, she shook her head, though they couldn't see it. "We're on our way, Miss Monroe. Stay calm." But when she hung up, she picked the phone up again. No plan, no hesitation, just instinct. The message went out. "I'm on my way to the hospital. It's happening. Don't worry, I'm okay." She didn't expect a reply. But seconds later, the screen lit up. "I'm coming. D. You don't need to, Dante. I'm near Mercy General. 10 minutes. She let out a pained laugh. "You never listen, do you?" When the ambulance pulled to the hospital, she saw him waiting outside. Rain fell hard, soaking his dark coat. He had no umbrella, but his eyes were full of fear and couldn't hide. "Are you okay?" he asked as nurses wheeled her in. "Fine. If you stop looking at me like I'm dying." He exhaled a shaky laugh. "Sorry. I've never done this before." "Done what?" Waited for a life to begin. She wanted to answer, but another contraction hit. She gripped the armrest, then felt his hand close over hers. She thought to pull away, but didn't. His hand was warm, steady, real. The delivery room was bright, and the sound of the fetal monitor was steady and sharp. Each time pain surged through her, Natasha squeezed Dante's hand. He said nothing, just held on, firm and sure. When a nurse asked, "Are you her husband?" Dante froze. Natasha, exhausted, whispered, "No, he's a friend." He looked at her, silent momentarily. then said quietly, "I'm here, if you want me to be." "I want that," she breathed. There was no reason left to pretend to be strong. She let herself lean on his presence. No explanations, no boundaries. When the doctor said, "It's time," she tightened her grip on his hand. "You ready for this?" she asked between ragged breaths. He bent close, whispering, "On the way here, I asked what to say to a birthing partner. I'm prepared." She laughed through tears. "You're ridiculous." "That's good. Keep breathing," he murmured, voice low and steady. "You've got this. Almost there." And then she pushed. Once, twice, 3 times. The doctor's voice, the nurse's commands, the sound of her heartbeat pounding in her ears, and then a cry, high, pure, slicing through the air. Time stopped. A single tear slid down Natasha's cheek. She wasn't sure if it was hers or his. "It's a girl," the doctor said, placing the tiny bundle on her chest. Natasha looked down. A wrinkled, red, perfect face. "Hi, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Welcome to the world." Dante stepped back to give her space. But when Natasha lifted her head, he was still there, eyes wet, hands trembling slightly. "Would you like to meet her?" she asked. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." She gently placed the baby in his arms. Dante took her carefully, as if afraid he might break something sacred. The baby's eyes fluttered open, soft, unfocused, calm. A tiny hand brushed his wrist. He froze, inhaled. "Hello, Hope," he whispered. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Natasha watched him, this man of discipline and precision, trembling at the weight of a newborn. And she knew something inside him had changed forever. Winter light streamed through the curtains the next morning, landing on the small crib. Hope slept peacefully, her breathing soft and even. Dante sat beside the bed, shirt wrinkled, hair tousled. "You didn't go home?" she asked. "No. I waited for you to wake up. You didn't have to stay all night." "I didn't have to," he said with a faint smile. "I wanted to." She said nothing, just looked at the baby, then at him. "Thank you, Dante." "For what?" "For being here." He nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes, the only thing we really need to do is show up." Outside the window, Seattle's rain still fell. But inside that small hospital room, something new had been born. A family, though neither of them dared to call it that. That spring in Seattle came late. Mist still hovered each morning above Lake Union, and the trees lining the streets stood bare, as if they hadn't quite woken from winter's sleep. In a small 10th-floor apartment, Natasha Monroe was beginning a new life, not with exhibitions or television lights, but with the fragmented cries of a newborn at 3 a.m. and half-finished bottles of milk beside her laptop. Hope was 3 weeks old, tiny, but fierce, as if she had known all along that her mother needed a reason to keep breathing. Each night, Natasha sat in the rocking chair, holding her daughter, listening to the rain tapping the window in rhythm with the tiny heartbeat in her arms. Sometimes she cried without knowing why, not from sadness, but from the weight of everything. Exhaustion, joy, fear, gratitude. It all blended, overflowing like the rain outside. By day, she worked from home. The laptop sat beside the crib, project files stacked between baby wipes and toys. Maya, Dante's assistant, stopped by weekly, bringing groceries, documents, and sometimes pastries from Natasha's favorite bakery. "He asked me to," Maya would say with a playful smile. "Mr. Rossi believes sweets restore creativity faster than coffee." Dante didn't visit often, but somehow he was always there. His texts arrived exactly when she needed them. "Sleeping any better? How's Hope doing? If you need anything, say so." Natasha never once replied, "I need anything." But one night, while feeding Hope, she typed a short message. "I'm fine, but thank you for asking." That was all. His reply came a minute later. "No thanks needed. I want to know you're both safe." From those brief exchanges, something quiet began to take shape. Trust. Not the passionate, promised kind, but the steady kind you build when you know that if you fall, someone will silently hold the space around you until you can stand again. 3 months later, Natasha returned to work at the first community art center in Seattle. When she entered, the staff stood and applauded. Not for the new director, but for the woman who had dared to return, with a baby carrier strapped to her chest, Hope sleeping soundly inside. During the first team meeting, Dante sat in the back of the room, listening silently. He nodded when Natasha finished presenting the Art for Everyone campaign. Excellent. Keep that vision. But if you need more funding, please let me know. I don't want you trading your time with your daughter for budgets. You talk like everything can be solved with plans and numbers, she teased. He smiled. Because most things can, except art and babies. Those two still confuse me. The room burst into laughter, the tension breaking instantly. But Natasha could see what hid behind his smile, genuine care he didn't know how to show. After the meeting, when everyone had left, Dante approached her. "Natasha," he said, "I wanted to ask, do you need extra help with Hope here at the center?" She shook her head. "No, I want her close. She reminds me why any of this matters." Dante looked down at the sleeping baby, her tiny hand gripping the edge of her mother's blouse. "You know," he said softly, "I think one day Hope will grow up believing her mother is the strongest woman in the world." Natasha smiled faintly. "I just hope she doesn't think her mom runs on coffee instead of milk." Dante laughed, a rare, unguarded sound, warm and genuine. In that moment, afternoon light poured through the glass wall, bathing the three of them in gold. The man in a dark suit, the woman with her child, and the sleeping baby between them. None of them realized it yet, but they already looked a little like a family. The months that followed unfolded in small rhythms. Hope rolled over for the first time. Hope laughed for the first time. Hope grabbed Dante's finger when he stopped by with paperwork. She always recognized him, even if he only appeared once or twice weekly. Each time the door opened, her eyes lit up, lips curling into a smile, followed by a soft ooh of delight. "She remembers me?" he asked, bending close. "Probably because you always smell like coffee," Natasha said. "Babies remember scents better than faces." He smiled, lifting the little girl, awkward at first, then natural, cradling her head as if studying a delicate piece of art. "It's strange," he murmured. "Feels like holding the whole world in my hands." Natasha watched him, saying nothing. She saw the man who usually hid behind numbers and control melt for the first time, disarmed by a 6-month-old child. One evening, after Hope had fallen asleep, Natasha's phone lit up with a message. "If the weather's clear tomorrow, I invite you and Hope to Gasworks Park. Just a small picnic." She read it twice, maybe 3 times. Part of her hesitated, afraid of being seen, of gossip, of feelings she couldn't quite name. But the next morning, she went. Dante was already there, on the dewy grass with a blanket spread out, a thermos of coffee, a few biscuits, and a box of strawberries. Hope squealed when she saw him, reaching out to be held. He caught her clumsy but careful. "Good morning, little princess," he said. His voice softened in a way that made Natasha laugh. "If you said that in front of your employees, they'd never believe it. Then it's lucky I only say it to you too." They sat on the grass, the breeze light, the smell of coffee and wildflowers mingling in the air. Natasha watched him play with her daughter and realized, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to try. That night, after putting Hope to sleep, she checked her phone. A message waited for her. "Thank you for today. I haven't felt that peaceful in years." "D," she typed back. "Me too." Then she set the phone aside and looked at her sleeping child, moonlight resting gently on the baby's cheek. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "I think we really are okay." And somewhere across the lake, in a high-rise office overlooking the same moonlit water, a man sat in the dark, staring at her message and smiled quietly. In the silence of Seattle, 2 people had found each other, not through grand confessions or promises of love, but through presence, steady, patient, real. Hope was 8 months old. Her soft baby hair had grown long enough to curl messily across her forehead. Her eyes were bright, always curious, always watching. She laughed easily, but sometimes furrowed her brow with deep focus, especially whenever Dante was near. Natasha often joked that her daughter had taste because when Dante entered a room, Hope would abandon her toys, crawl toward him, and reach her arms. "See," Dante laughed, "she only cares about the guy who brings coffee." "Or maybe," Natasha replied, half teasing, half true, the one who makes her mom smile. They both laughed, then fell silent, realizing something quietly shifted in the air. That afternoon, Hope lay on a playmat in Natasha's office at the art center. She loved being there, sunlight streaming through the expansive windows, colorful fabric panels swaying in the breeze, and the low hum of her mother's and Dante's voices blending like music. A small babble rose from below when Natasha discussed plans for the next exhibition. She smiled, glancing down. "Sweetheart, Mommy's working," she said softly. Hope looked up, smiled, and uttered two clear syllables, "Dada." Both adults froze. The room went silent. Even the ticking clock seemed to pause. Dante looked at Natasha. She looked back. Both gave a nervous smile, afraid to name what they'd heard. "She's just making sounds," Natasha murmured. "Of course," he said, nodding, but his voice was suddenly rough. Then Hope said it again, louder this time, with intent, pointing at him. "Dada, Dada." Something flickered in his eyes. He knelt, voice trembling. Are you calling me?" Natasha wanted to laugh, to ease the moment, but her throat tightened. She could only watch. One man, one child, and the world seemed to narrow to just them. Hope crawled over, tugged on his pant leg, and giggled. Dante picked her up, awkwardly, but Hope nestled against his chest, tapping his chin as if to confirm, "Yes, Dada." Light poured into the room. Dante laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that melted something in Natasha's heart. She stood still, eyes glistening, unsure if her tears came from emotion or from the quiet truth she finally recognized. They had been a family for a long time. They just hadn't dared to call it that. That evening, back at her apartment, Natasha brewed tea while Dante gathered the scattered folders from her table. Hope slept peacefully in her crib. "Are you tired?" she asked. "No. You?" "Not really. I think today was special." He stopped what he was doing. "Because," she smiled. "You know why." A pause. He set his briefcase down, sitting across from her. His gaze searched hers. "I never thought I'd hear anyone call me Dad. I never believed I deserved that word. And now?" she asked gently. "Now I think." He glanced toward the crib, watching Hope's chest rise and fall. "Maybe love doesn't need blood, just presence." Natasha's fingers tightened around her teacup. His words went straight to the deepest place in her heart. She wanted to say, "I feel the same," but instead whispered, "Thank you, Dante, for staying." He didn't answer, just nodded softly, eyes warm. Together, they listened to Hope's breathing, simple, steady, and somehow enough to make the whole room glow. A week later, Natasha invited him to dinner. Nothing fancy, just a simple pasta dish, a bottle of light wine, and an old jazz record playing in the background. Hope was asleep, the lights were low, and Seattle's rain tapped gently outside. "You know," she said as she poured wine, "when I was younger, I thought happiness meant having the perfect family, parents, children, a home, those smiling photos on the wall. But now I think, maybe happiness is just having someone who doesn't leave when the rain starts." Dante smiled, candlelight flickering in his eyes. "And I think," he said, "some storms are worth staying for." They clinked glasses and fell silent. No need for words, just the sound of rain against the glass, and two heartbeats finding rhythm again. After dinner, Dante stood. "I'll help clean up." "You don't have to. You're a guest." "Then let me be a special one." She laughed. "You always find a way to win." "Not to win," he said, setting a plate in the sink. "Just to stay a little longer." She turned. Their eyes met. No longer boss and employee. No longer polite distance. Just two people who had weathered storms together, holding space for each other's silence. "Natasha," he said quietly, "I'm afraid to say this. I don't want to ruin what we have. Say it anyway. I think I've fallen in love with you." The room stilled. Natasha's heart pounded. She wasn't surprised, only light. "You think?" she teased softly. "Yes," he said, "and I'm scared, because what I want isn't just you, both of you. You and Hope." Natasha took a step closer, whispering, "That's not something to fear, Dante. That's something to be grateful for. He looked at her for a long moment, then lifted his hand, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, as if afraid to break the moment. The kiss came naturally, no reason. No script, no fireworks. Just a quiet meeting, soft and real. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "we keep working. We keep our boundaries. But somewhere within them we both know something's changed. For good." That night, when Dante left, the rain had stopped. Natasha stood by the window, watching his shadow disappear down the street. Then she turned to the crib, smoothing her daughter's hair. "You know what, sweetheart?" she whispered. "Tonight, your mom opened her heart. And someone walked in, very gently. In her sleep, Hope smiled, a tiny, perfect smile that seemed to light up the whole room. Outside, the Seattle sky was still damp with rain. But inside Natasha's heart, the clouds had finally cleared. 2 years passed like a single breath. Hope could now run, sing little songs, and pick out her dresses in the morning. Whenever Dante was busy with meetings, she would climb onto Natasha's lap, hold up the phone, and say, "Seriously, can I call Daddy, Mommy?" Natasha would laugh and nod. In their small world, everything was calm, warm, whole, and real. The cultural initiative had now expanded to 12 cities. Natasha was called the woman who redefined community art in America. She appeared on magazine covers and talk shows, but always kept her private life off limits. People only knew 2 things. Director Natasha Monroe had a daughter named Hope and a trusted partner named Dante Rossi. One spring evening, at the opening of Dreams of the Forgotten, Natasha stood on stage, microphone in hand, her voice steady. "We don't build these spaces for people to admire art, we build them so they can see themselves." Applause filled the hall. Dante, seated in the front row, smiled. Their eyes met across the light, no words, just understanding. And then, as the ceremony ended, the backstage door burst open. A voice she thought she had buried forever cut through the air. "You speak beautifully, Natasha. Almost enough to make people forget you ever lied." She turned. Devon. His hair was perfect, his suit expensive, but his eyes were cold, sharp, metallic. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice like ice. "Congratulating my ex-wife," he said smoothly. "And my daughter." The crowded room fell silent. Within a second, Dante was beside her, his voice calm and low. "You should leave, Monroe." Devon smirked. Ah, the righteous billionaire, still guarding her like a museum piece. "No," Dante said evenly. "Like family." The 2 men faced each other, 2 ends of the same history. "Hope is my child," Devon said, each word a blade. "And I'm here to claim what's mine." Natasha gripped the microphone until her knuckles went white. "You lost that right, Devon. You threw it away in front of millions. You have nothing here." He tilted his head, smiling faintly. "We'll see if the court agrees." He turned and walked out, leaving behind the scent of expensive cologne and a room full of people pretending not to have heard. Dante looked at her. "You okay?" "No," she said honestly, "but I will be. He destroyed me once. This time, I'm not alone." Dante placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "This time, I'm here." The next morning, headlines exploded. Devon Monroe demands custody of daughter from former marriage child now living with billionaire Dante Rossi. The press swarmed like wolves. Cameras waited outside Natasha's home, at the art center, and Hope's preschool. Natasha Monroe, brave mother or selfish gatekeeper. Rossi, savior or man who stole another's child. At a company press conference, Dante's voice was calm but firm. "We will not comment on private family matters. Our focus is, and will remain, the child's well-being." But behind closed doors, they both knew this wasn't private anymore. Devon had hired one of New York's most aggressive legal teams, demanding DNA tests and custody rights. Natasha's fingers clenched around Dante's hand in the law office until they turned pale. "He doesn't care about Hope," she said through her teeth. "He just wants revenge. He can't stand that we're happy." Dante squeezed her hand. "He won't get anything. We have truth, we have proof, and you have me." Their attorney, Catherine Winters, nodded. "I've reviewed everything, the live interview, the recordings. 2 years of total abandonment, no support, no contact. Add to that Hope's clear emotional bond with Mr. Rossi. The odds are very much in our favor. What about the public? Natasha asked wearily. He's trying to spin the story. Catherine gave a small, knowing smile. Sometimes, the public can be the best ally. And she was right. The internet erupted. Hashtags like, "Where were you, Devon?" flooded every platform. People replayed the old broadcast Devon saying, "I never wanted that baby," while Natasha was 6 months pregnant. A female journalist wrote, "You can't throw a child away like trash, then come back years later demanding to be a father because it looks good on paper." The world saw the truth, the one Natasha had carried alone once. This time, she was protected not just by the crowd, but by the man who sat beside her, his hand always wrapped around hers like a quiet vow. The day of the trial. Natasha wore simple black hair neatly pinned back. Dante stood beside her, calm in his grey suit, so steady that his composure became hers. Devon sat across the courtroom, flanked by lawyers, cameras flashing outside. When it was Natasha's turn to testify, she rose, met the judge's gaze, and spoke clearly. That man chose not to be a father, not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. And a child doesn't need someone who wants her only when it's convenient. Devon tried to interrupt. "I've changed." "Changed," she cut in. "Before or after you saw our photos on Forbes?" The courtroom fell silent. Dante watched her with quiet pride. Then the judge asked, "And who does the child recognize as her father?" Natasha turned, her voice soft. "She calls him," and she pointed to Dante. Dante stepped forward, placing a hand on the witness stand. "I don't share blood with Hope," he said, "but I share every memory she has from her first breath to her first steps. I'm not asking for rights. I'm asking the court to recognize what the child already knows, that I am her father." When he finished, the courtroom was silent except for the faint sound of someone stifling a sob. 3 weeks later, the verdict came. The court dismissed Devon's claims, ruling that he had relinquished his parental rights through explicit public declaration and sustained neglect. At the same time, the judge approved Natasha's petition, granting Dante Rossi full legal adoption of Hope. The courtroom erupted. Devon slumped in his seat, pale and defeated. Natasha, tears streaming, turned to Dante. He took her hand and whispered, "Let's go home." That afternoon, rain fell over Seattle again, but it no longer felt cold. Hope twirled in a white dress in their small house on Queen Anne Hill, spinning in circles. "Dada, Mommy, cake," she giggled. Dante lifted her, spinning her higher. "Do you know what today is, Hope?" "Cake Day," she declared. "That's right," Natasha laughed. "And it's also the day your name changed to Hope Rossi." Hope tilted her head, not fully understanding, but giggled when Dante kissed her forehead. "Because today," he said softly, "is the day your dad finally got to be called what you've been calling him all along." Natasha watched them, these two souls she loved most, and knew the storm had passed. No more headlines, no more whispers, just 3 people, and the gentle rhythm of rain outside, the heartbeat of a family, real and whole at last. That summer in Seattle came with sunlight soft as honey. On the brick street, leading up Queen Anne Hill, the home of Natasha and Dante glowed under the evening light. The windows were open, letting in the scent of lavender and the sound of Hope's laughter. "Hiya, Dada, hiya." Dante pushed the swing, Hope's twin pigtails bouncing, her blue dress fluttering in the wind. From the porch, Natasha watched, tea in hand, the 2 hearts that had rewritten her life. The man who once only knew how to work, now learning how to laugh truly, and the little girl born from pain, now carrying sunlight wherever she went. When Hope tired, Dante lifted her, cradling her against his chest. "Story time?" he asked. "Yes, but Mommy tells it," Natasha laughed. "Which story, Princess?" "The one with the rain, the sad lady, and then the house." She understood. Her daughter asked for their story in her own childlike way. "All right," Natasha began, her voice soft as breath. "Once upon a time, a woman thought the rain would never stop until someone came along. He didn't bring an umbrella. He stood beside her, got soaked with her, and waited for the sky to clear." Dante looked over, quiet, eyes warm. Hope leaned against her mother's shoulder, lids drooping. "And then what happened?" she whispered. "And then," Natasha smiled. "The rain stopped. They didn't go far. They just stayed and built a little home warm enough never to fear the rain again." Hope drifted into sleep in her mother's arms. Dante fetched a light blanket, gently covering them both. He sat beside Natasha and took her hand. "I think," he said softly, "every storm in life leads us exactly where we're meant to be." "And sometimes," she replied, "that place isn't a location, it's a person." Time moved in the rhythm of quiet joys. Mornings filled with Hope's messy pancakes, evenings when Dante read bedtime stories, his voice deep and steady, like a heartbeat. Early hours when Natasha brewed coffee and stuck little notes on the fridge. "Don't forget to hug her before you go." She still worked, directing projects across cities. Dante still ran Rossi Global, but they had both learned how to slow down, not just to exist, but to live. One late afternoon, while Hope was coloring in the living room, Dante brought out 2 cups of tea and set one before Natasha. "There's something I want to ask," he said. She grinned. "You sound serious. Are you firing me from the art center?" "No," he said quietly. "Quite the opposite." He stood, reaching into his jacket pocket a small blue velvet box. At that exact moment, Hope came running, holding a crayon drawing, 3 figures standing under a colorful roof. "For you, Mummy," she announced proudly. Natasha took it, her heart trembling. When she looked up, Dante was kneeling. His eyes were deep, steady like still water. "Natasha Monroe," he began, "you taught me that love isn't a promise, it's a choice we make repeatedly. I chose you and Hope on the very first day, and I want to keep choosing you for the rest of my life." He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, crowned with a green emerald the same shade as the dress she had worn on that fateful interview years ago. "Will you marry me not just so we stay together, but so we become home to one another?" Tears slipped down Natasha's cheeks as she smiled. "You've been my home for a long time, Dante Rossi." Hope squealed, "Dada's marrying Mommy. I'll throw flowers." All 3 of them laughed, their embrace mingling with the soft hum of the evening breeze. The wedding was small, held in the garden behind the cultural center where their story had begun. The guests were few: Maya, Catherine, close friends, and a handful of artists Natasha had once helped. Hope, now their little flower girl, walked solemnly down the aisle, scattering petals with grave concentration. When the officiant asked, "Does anyone object?" Hope shouted, "No," making everyone burst into laughter. Dante bent to kiss her forehead before turning to Natasha, voice trembling. "I promise not just to be your husband, but your friend, your partner. I'll keep choosing you and our children until my last breath." Natasha's eyes shimmered. "You never came to save me," she said softly. "You just came to stand beside me, and that saved us both." When they exchanged rings, the golden light of dusk poured over their hands, no spotlight, no crowd, just 2 souls and a child who already knew. This was what home felt like. The following October, in the same house on the hill, the cry of a newborn filled the air. Marcus Rossi entered the world with the sunrise. Hope, now 4, gazed at her tiny brother in Natasha's arms and whispered, "I'll teach him how to say Dada, okay?" Dante laughed, kissing her forehead. "I'm sure you will." Life went on busy but different. There was no more need to prove anything. Natasha's next exhibition was titled, "Home is a Verb." On the main wall hung a photograph. Hope nestled in Dante's arms the day he officially adopted her. Below it, a single line read, "Family isn't born, it's built by choice." When visitors paused before it, Natasha would smile and say, "That's the most beautiful piece I've ever made." One winter evening, rain pattered gently against the roof. Dante sat reading, Natasha curled up in her chair, and Hope taught Marcus to stack wooden blocks. "Mommy," Hope said, "tell us the story again." "Which one, sweetheart?" "The one with the rain, the sad lady, and then the house." Natasha smiled, glancing at Dante, the man who once witnessed her fall, now the one who shared her peace. "All right," she began. "Once, there was someone left behind in the rain. But she learned that sometimes you don't need someone to bring you shelter. You need someone who chooses to stay." Hope leaned on her mother's shoulder, eyes fluttering closed. Marcus slept in Dante's arms. Outside, the rain kept falling, but it wasn't cold anymore. Because inside that small house, they had found what so many spend their lives searching for, a place to belong. 7 years later, Hope Rossi was 8, tall enough to reach the kitchen counter now, her hair long and wavy, her dark eyes bright like midnight stars. Seattle still rained often, but inside the little house on Queen Anne Hill, every season had sunlight in Hope's laughter, and in the way Dante and Natasha looked at each other every morning, still a little amazed at the peace they'd built. Marcus, now 5, was a burst of energy, always running through rooms with their new puppy at his heels. The house was never quiet, but that noise, laughter, small footsteps, and breakfast clatter was the music they never wanted to end. One Saturday morning, Hope sat in the living room doing homework. "Mom," she asked suddenly, "they said every kid has a real dad at school. Do I have one?" The question was light as air, but it stopped Natasha in place. She set down her coffee and came to sit beside her daughter. "Do you know what a dad is, Hope?" "The person who makes you," Hope said, then added thoughtfully, "and the one who teaches you how to tie your shoes." Natasha smiled. "Then who taught you to tie yours?" "Daddy." "Then I think you just answered your own question." Hope frowned, thinking. "But," my friend said, "I'm different, because Daddy and I don't have the same blood." Natasha took a slow breath. "Blood keeps us alive, sweetheart, but love tells us where we belong." "Like our family?" Hope asked. "Exactly," Natasha whispered. "Our family wasn't born from blood, from the choice to stay." Dante, standing quietly in the doorway, had heard it all. He didn't interrupt, but when Hope turned and saw him, she ran straight into his arms. "I don't care about any of that," she said firmly. "You're my daddy, and that's it." He knelt, hugging her close, voice thick. "And you're the gift I never dared to ask for, but somehow got anyway." Time painted new pictures with each passing year. Hope grew into a bright, curious soul, artistic like her mother, and endlessly questioning. "Mom, does love ever expire?" "Not if you keep watering it every day." "Daddy, why do people say I'm lucky?" "Because they don't realize we're lucky to have you." Sunday, colors was their family ritual of painting together at the kitchen table. Hope drew houses under rainbows. Marcus drew rockets, and Dante, still hopeless with art, drew organizational charts for the cultural center. "You're the only person who can turn family art time into a staff meeting," Natasha teased. "At least," he grinned, "we're all working on the same project, our family." One September afternoon, Hope came home with teary eyes. "What happened, love?" Natasha asked. "At school, someone said I don't have a real dad. I told them I do, but they laughed. They said I was adopted." Dante knelt beside her. "Are you sad?" "Yes, but also mad, because they're wrong." He brushed her hair gently. "People fear what they don't understand. Sometimes they laugh because they don't dare to ask. You can teach them not with words, but by how you live." "How do I do that?" "By being happy, by still calling me Dad every morning, and by knowing you're loved without condition." Hope nodded. That night, she wrote in her little journal, "Dad didn't make me. He chose me. And I think choosing someone to love forever is even more important than being the one who made them." When Hope was 12, she found an old video, the infamous live interview from long ago. Natasha was making dinner when she heard the TV flicker on. "Don't," she said quickly, but it was too late. On screen, a younger Devon said, "I don't want that baby." Hope froze, color draining from her face. "That man was him, wasn't it?" she whispered. Natasha sat beside her, nodding slowly. "Yes, he's the one who helped bring you into this world. But that's all." Hope bit her lip. "He didn't want me." "It's not your fault," Natasha said softly, trembling. "It's the fault of adults who don't know how to love bravely." Dante entered quietly and took a seat beside them. Hope looked up, eyes wet. "Dad, do you hate him?" "No," Dante said gently. "Because if not for him, I would never have had you." Hope was silent, then threw her arms around him. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too," he murmured. "Always." Years later, Hope stood on stage, bathed in golden light, at her high school graduation. 18, now confident, radiant, her eyes reflecting the same strength Natasha once carried. In her valedictorian speech, she said, "People often ask me, 'Who are your real parents?' And I always answer, 'The real ones are the ones who stayed.' Family isn't just where we're born, it's where we're loved every day." From the audience, Dante squeezed Natasha's hand, tears falling quietly. The crowd rose in applause, but the world had gone still for them, only gratitude remained. Outside, sunlight spilled through the Seattle clouds, golden and soft, just like the day their story began, in the heart of a storm that finally led them home. 20 years had passed since that fateful television interview. Seattle was still the city of rain and lights. But for the Rossi family, every rainfall carried a quiet memory of how it all began, of a day drenched in tears that slowly turned into light. Hope was now 25. She managed projects for the Rossi Cultural Foundation, the art organization her mother founded and her father expanded worldwide. People called her the next generation of a miracle story. But to Dante and Natasha, she was still the little girl who once babbled Dada in an office full of sunlight. Marcus, 19, was studying architecture in Chicago. He said he was born in a house built with love and Mom's midnight coffee. Natasha always laughed. "That line deserves to be painted on our living room wall." The house on Queen Anne Hill hadn't changed: wooden porch, expansive windows overlooking Lake Union, the small garden where hope once swung as a child. It had seen everything: tears, laughter, fear, and dreams made real. One autumn morning, Natasha rose early. She made tea and watched the mist drift over the lake. Her hair was silvered now, but her eyes still shone those of a woman who had walked through loss and chosen love instead. Dante appeared behind her, in a grey sweater, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You're up early. Couldn't fall back asleep. Do you ever think about that day?" "Which day?" "The day I gave birth to hope. The day you came to the hospital." He smiled. "That day changed my life." Natasha looked at him, morning light flickering in his eyes. "I used to think I had nothing left but darkness. But you came not to shine a light, but to sit with me in the dark until I could see it myself." He squeezed her hand gently. "I didn't light anything, Nat. You already glowed. I just stood close enough to see it." That afternoon, Hope came home. She had just returned from New York, where her exhibition Echoes of Grace had become a sensation. On the program cover was her quote, "No storm lasts forever. What matters is who stayed with you while it fell." She wrapped Natasha in a hug. "Mum, I missed home." From the kitchen, Dante called, "What guy made you miss home this much?" Hope laughed. "No guy, just the people I love most." Dinner was simple pasta, garlic bread, salad but full of laughter. Marcus called from Chicago, grinning on screen. "Mom, I made porridge out of ramen." "That's not porridge, sweetheart," Natasha replied. "That's a dangerous experiment." Everyone burst out laughing. When the call ended, the golden light softened the room. Hope's smile faded slightly. "I have something to tell you." Both parents looked at her. "I'm about to say yes to a proposal." Natasha blinked. "Really?" "Yes. His name's Ethan. We've been working together in New York. We're not rushing the wedding, but I want you to meet him." Dante nodded calmly, though his eyes glistened. "Does he know your story?" "Yes. I told him everything. He said, 'I admire your parents. They didn't just teach you how to love, they taught the world how to.'" Natasha squeezed her daughter's hand. "If he can see that, you're walking the right path." Hope rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "I just hope I can love someone like you two, love each other quietly, and for a long time." Dante chuckled. "Quietly. Your mom once threw a project plan at me during a meeting. And you still married me," Natasha teased. "Because I knew," he said, smiling. "No one else could calm the storm in me like you." Hope visited the Voices of the Forgotten Gallery a few days later, her mother's first exhibition, now part of the National Collection. On the wall hung a small plaque, "For Hope, the girl who made everything make sense." She stood silently before it. Behind her, Dante approached, hands in his pockets, voice low and warm. "You know, when your mom named you Hope," she told me, "it's not the hope that things will be easy, it's the hope that even when they're hard, we'll still choose love." Hope turned, eyes bright with tears. "Now I understand. I understand why you two always seemed calm, no matter what you went through. He smiled. Because we never tried to avoid the storm. We just decided to stand in it together. Hope hugged him tightly. I promise I'll choose that too. The following year, Hope married Ethan in the garden behind the cultural center, where her parents had once exchanged rings. Natasha wore an emerald dress. Dante, a grey suit, walked their daughter down the aisle. When the officiant asked, would anyone like to say something before the vows? Dante stepped forward, voice deep and tender like a cello. Parents can't protect their children from every storm, but they can teach them how to build a roof. You already have that roof in your heart. Now build another with the one you love. It doesn't have to be perfect, only warm. Hope burst into tears, hugging him. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Hope. As the music rose, Natasha watched them, her chest overflowing. Once, she had thought her story ended in a cold TV studio, but here, surrounded by flowers and laughter, she realized it had only come full circle. It began in the rain, and it ended in light. That night, after the wedding, the house was quiet again. Natasha and Dante sat on the porch, hands entwined, watching the drizzle fall. You know, he murmured, the day I saw you walking out of that studio, I thought, this woman just lost everything. But I was wrong. You hadn't lost anything, you were making space for a new life. Natasha smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder, and when I saw you in that hospital hallway, I thought, this man will leave too, like everyone else. But you didn't. He squeezed her hand. I told you I'd always stay when it rains. She chuckled softly. And maybe rain is just the universe's way of making us sit closer. The rain fell steadily, the city glowing like a sea of stars. Their story no longer tragedy, no longer headline, was now proof of something rare and straightforward. Family doesn't begin with blood. It starts with the courage to love someone, even when love asks for everything. Dante whispered, like a quiet epilogue. Tomorrow, it'll rain again. Natasha smiled. I know, and we'll still be here. Their hands tightened. Warmth spread between them like the first light after a storm. Their story, from betrayal to forgiveness, from loneliness to home, closed on the only thing that ever remains after every downpour,